Right, we welcome up Ross and who is it going to be?
Shane and Lester.
Oh, Shane. Oh, we're going to straight up. There was an introduction by no introduction? No? Lester and team. Shane, Richard. Welcome, Shane.
Thank you.
Richard, are you coming up? Apologies for being behind, I suppose, as usual. We try hard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just like to take this opportunity to, formally introduce the Council to Shane Ellison, our new Chief Executive. He's not so new anymore, and many of you will have met him. So the December quarter really represents the halfway point of our financial year, and results to date reflect good progress, I guess, towards our targets, and Shane will discuss these in more detail. I suppose we just want to raise the point that in many ways Auckland Transport is at something of a watershed. We've got a new Chief Executive who's board mandated to deliver the emerging strategy via a change in the way Auckland Transport works with its customers and stakeholders. So there's a significant transformation piece to Shane's role and responsibility, which is around a cultural change within Auckland Transport. We're dealing with, I guess, the same thing that you're dealing with, a plethora of statutory documents. There's almost every acronym you could think of that we're dealing with at the moment, and we do wonder sometime, and I guess, Mr. Mayor, this is an issue that should be discussed sometime, if these could be united into one kind of more meaningful plan, because we have a lot of difficulty with the phasing and coordination of these plans. It's a very good time for us because Auckland Transport, the Council and Central Government are really aligned on the key priorities. At least in the time that I've been involved, this hasn't been the case, and this should really get the wind beneath our wings, and we're looking forward to that. We are also at a point where Auckland Transport, and I've touched on this before, really needs to start leading behavioural change, whether it's in active transport, road safety, or environmental improvement. We have got this unprecedented growth in population, and really we can't just continue to think that we can build our way through it. We do need to change mindset. Just one point I did want to raise, and we'll be bringing more formality to this in due course. There has been a board-led independent review of road safety. It's an issue that the board has deep concern about, and the death and serious injury on Auckland roads is increasing at an alarming rate in Auckland, and is certainly ahead of the national average. Someone is seriously injured or killed on Auckland roads almost every day. We often hear that the cost of congestion in Auckland is about 1.3 billion per year, and that's serious, and it gets a lot of focus and attention. We don't often hear that the social costs associated with death and serious injury has been put at almost the same level of 1.3 billion. So Auckland Transport is determined to reverse this trend and work towards a zero harm target. So this is quite a shift in our own paradigm and something we can't do by ourselves. So we're looking to do this in a coordinated way with all of the agencies. And soon we have a meeting with myself, the Mayor, and the Minister of Transport and the Associate Minister to kick that off. This safety has really been elevated to the number one priority at Auckland Transport, and it's also a clear priority for the new government. And I guess, congestion causes lots of frustration, but death and serious injury has an impact that is very significant on individuals and families. So just to note with you that we have this review not quite finished. We'll be working with the Mayor and the Ministers. That has to be a coordinated response amongst the agencies, but we intend to put real emphasis on this and take this a lot more seriously. because the consequences are just too, well, the stakes are just so high. So I'll just pass over to Shane at this point in time. This is a man who doesn't own a motor vehicle, and he has actually convinced me that I'm going to shift my habits because I have always felt that, you know, having such a range of commitments in different places made it too difficult. So I've got a new tutor in this, and over the next few months I'm going to be, to a large extent, ditching the car. And I think this is something that a lot of Aucklanders should do. Jane.
Thank you, Lester. Kia ora koutou. Good morning, Chairman, the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and Councillors, and also the members from the Independent Māori Statutory Board. You will have all received the second quarter report from Auckland Transport, but prior to taking any questions, I'd just like to take you through several highlights that are in the slides. And as my chairman said, there are these things in the presentation. There's some themes that are particularly relevant to the letter of expectations. So, in terms of the highlights, for the 12 months to the end of December 2017, public transport patronage grew to 91 million. That's a 7.4% increase on the same period to December 2016. And it's kind of a watershed year for Auckland because for the first time, the number of people taking public transport into the centre of the city in the morning peak exceeded the number of trips in cars. That's a fantastic outcome, and it's something that Aucklanders should be proud of. It also says that as a proof point, Aucklanders will use quality public transport. The biggest growth has been in train journeys of 12.3%, and the early signs from the new bus networks are looking very positive. In terms of the SOI targets, 11 targets were exceeded, 11 were met, and 7 were not met. The number of cycling trips continues to grow with a 6.2% uplift over the 12-month period ending December 2016. And we genuinely appreciate the support of councillors with the rollout of the cycling program and the completion as we move towards completion of the cycling network. To the end of December, I note that the financial results look in reasonable shape, but I do add a note of caution, and that note of caution is that the average fare yield per passenger on the PT network is declining, and Richard can talk a little bit more to that should you have any questions on it. But it does provide us with some headwinds for the rest of the year. We've put in place some measures. The executive team who are supporting me here today have put in some measures to try and mitigate that risk.
Probably just, sorry to see, I mean, that sounds like a bad thing, but in many ways it's a good thing because of the way the public transport system is working and the way integrated fares are working and how some of the responses we're getting are beyond our own modelling. So this is really good for the people using the services, but it creates issues for us from a financial perspective. So it's a successful outcome for PT, it's a difficulty for the P&L.
And just to go to Lester's point a bit further, one of the key drivers of that has been the success of the AT Hop card. We get such a high proportion of people using AT Hop now, which obviously comes with a discounted fare. If I can now just turn to some 3 key themes. The first one is Māori responsiveness. In this regard, Auckland Transport's moved forward on a number of commitments in the first 6 months of 2017-18. From a personal perspective, I was very, very humbled when I started with Auckland Transport. The organisation organised a pauwhiri for me with a large number of mana whenua present, and clearly this sent a major signal to the people in my organisation about the importance of Te Ao Māori. The second theme I'd like to talk about is health and safety. It's a big issue Lester's touched on road safety, but I'd like to talk a little bit about health and safety. The organisation has been ramping up efforts to ensure that our people go home from work safe and sound. And one important piece of that has been, of our health and safety framework, is the wellbeing of our people. We launched the Wellbeing AT Work Hub, which our employees can voluntarily take part in. 659 of our employees took part of that, took up the opportunity in November and December, which was a 51% increase on 2016. So major take-up in the number of our people who are interested in their own wellbeing. The key findings from that wellbeing assessment highlighted that the average heart age of our people, which is the key benchmark in terms of wellbeing of our people, is improving year on year and is now in line with the actual average age of our people. So that's a great outcome. I also draw your attention to the graph at the bottom of the slide, which shows that the number of work-related injury claims at Auckland Transport has significantly reduced from 2014. Clearly, as my chairman has said, safety and road safety are an important focus going forward for Auckland Transport. The last theme that I'd like to address is network optimisation. You will be aware that the fundamental aim of our optimisation program is to improve the performance of the existing transport network. It almost always provides better value for money outcomes for ratepayers. Councillors, some of you will remember that we mobilised a joint traffic task force with the Transport Agency and Auckland Airport just over 12 months ago. This was focused on immediate fixes which could be put in place to address congestion on journeys to and from the airport during the summer season for customers. 11 significant actions were implemented by the task force. These included reconfiguration of the domestic forecourt, a new T2 lane on Tom Pearce Drive, signalised metering at roundabouts, and it also included improvements to the 380 Airporter service. The improvements between December 16 and December 17 have been very, very impressive, as I'll show you in the following two graphs. You'll see, for example, on a selected weekday in December 2016, the blue shaded section, which highlights the measured journey time from State Highway 20 to George Bolt Memorial Drive to the airport. You will see that the journey time could be as long as 80 minutes.
How many minutes?
80.
Okay.
Which, if you think about that yourself, getting to the airport, just from State Highway 20 to the airport, could be as long as 80 minutes. You think about the chaos in terms of people getting their flights and the impact on that. Okay? Very, very significant. 15th of December 2017, a year later, after a number of these initiatives have been put in place, you will see that the journey time, again on that section in blue, the maximum was around 35 minutes. So for customers, in the worst case, a 45-minute improvement. I think that outcome's quite outstanding, and it's a tribute to the collaboration between the Transport Agency, the airport, and the team at Auckland Transport, led by Andrew Allen, who's here today. I'll flick through to the last slide, which is around Whangaparoa. Obviously, a lot of work was done in Q2, implemented in late January this year. All I want to say at this point is the early indications are the results are very positive, and we'll come back to you later this year and give you an update on how that's going. Thank you.
We're open for questions.
Richard, anything you wish to comment on?
No, not at all.
Okay, right, we have Councillor Casey.
Yeah, all my questions are for Lester, because they're all historical and all based in your report, Lester. First of all, you mentioned in the report about the industrial dispute, but it's a very scant sentence saying there's been 2 instances. Could you tell the committee what the issue is, please? And what you're expecting into the future?
Sam.
So the issue is around the safety and security of customers, not only on trains, but on the entire network. And it is also around the implementation of the operating model that goes with that. Auckland Transport has taken a view that customers are concerned about the security and safety, not just when they get on a train, but from the moment they leave their door until they get to their destination. So a lot of the dialogue that is yet to occur is around reframing that discussion. Associated with that is, as with a number of other places in the world, it is also around the way that doors are operated on trains, and the linkage between the two, both safety and security and around operation. We have got to a point as of just over a week ago where we have an arrangement to enter into a refreshed or a reset dialogue with Transdev, who's the operator of the train system, with the unions, and with a view to moving that forward in a more engaged and more constructive manner.
So are you expecting, in the report it says you're preempting the potential for further industrial action, so you're saying that that's off the table now?
We are saying that by entering into this reset mechanism and entering into a new, Transdev entering into a new collective agreement which lasts until 30th of September, there is very, very unlikely to be any industrial action between now and the 30th of September, and it gives us time to have a reset and a refresh discussion with all the parties involved.
What's the main change in the reset?
Well, I think that we're looking to enter into a high-performance, high-engagement model, which is a model that has been used very successfully in New Zealand, particularly successfully, and more recently by KiwiRail. So it's a different paradigm of engagement. So I guess you could say that historically Auckland Transport stood back and let the industrial relations play out between our contractor Transdev and their unions. So we've now taken the position to become more involved in that and enter into this high-performance, high-engagement process, which in fact these unions have actually quite good experience in with KiwiRail.
Okay. Thank you for
A
that
positive step forward.
Two other questions. First of all, our comment, congratulations on the Waterview Shared Path. In your report you said 40% numbers up. I think it must be double that. Absolutely amazing, successful to get people on bikes and out with their dogs and families.
Yeah, if I could just say on that, I think, look, cycleways are polarising. The Board of Auckland Transport is fully committed to reallocation of existing road space to create a more equitable balance between all users, not only vehicle users. And we understand that we will hit a number of bumps in the night on this, and we need to find, perhaps softer landings in the way we deal with these, but we are fully committed to this. This is actually in alignment with the council and the government. But I actually think that the opportunity for cycling is very significant, as you suggest, but we'll really get the multiplier effect when we get the connection of all of the cycleways. So we're fully committed to doing that, and we're looking hopefully to good support out of the refreshed ATAP GPS process, that we can keep the momentum up on the cycleways.
Such is the volume of people that use it, Lester, is that's where the 4 local boards set up the Have Your Say event on Saturday. And that was a comment said by many of the people coming through. It was they weren't linked up.
Yes.
A lot of them were on their bikes, a lot of them were on pedestrians.
So that is the goal, absolutely.
My other two questions will relate to reporting. In your report, you talk about the reporting to local boards. You obviously measure that in some way, but what you haven't heard from all of us is we'd like to be reported to as ward councillors, not as governor to governor, but just what's going on in the ward. And I heard recently when I raised it that something new is going to happen, but I don't know the details.
Wally.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Wally.
Morning, Councillor. Yeah, that was certainly one of the recommendations that came out of the governance review, that there be closer engagement with councillors, and the suite of initiatives and activities that we're undertaking, which are referenced in the report, are coming back. I'm not sure when they're being reported back to council, but there's about 20 initiatives, including how we're going to engage more regularly and more often with, and
Just
more
keep it on your
timely
agenda.
with council.
Excellent.
And so, sorry, Councillor Casey, you're suggesting a specific to the ward council
Board
as well
councillors,
as the
yeah.
generic to the council?
We don't learn about board things by osmosis. We need to
Yes.
hear directly
Perfect.
from you.
Yep.
And my last question, well, you can probably stay because it'll probably be you that answers it, but
Must I?
we've been talking about alcohol for about an hour this morning already, and we've just been talking about green bonds and ethical investment, and yet we've got buses still driving around Auckland with alcohol adverts on them. I know that Councillor Darby raised it last year, I've raised it this year. Why can't we get them off? Why can't you just say no?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, and Mark Lambert's here, but I'll attempt to answer that question. So, currently, advertising on bus services is a contract between a company called QMS and the operators themselves. Unless we specify under the PTOM contracts what can and can't be on those assets, on those vehicles, all we can really do is advocate and ask QMS and ask the
Have
bus
asked?
operators. We have asked. In the
And?
case that you referred to on the North Shore, the answer was no. But those PTOM contracts are going to be in place in July, and the restrictions that we have in our advertising policy around gaming,
Gambling.
gaming, alcohol, tobacco, etc., will apply under those contracts. They're already in place in the west and out south.
Yep.
So when we roll them out on the shore, they'll be in place as well.
So that's a historical aberration which will be removed as these contracts take place. And there's no opportunity for them to actually get around that.
Okay. Lester, just, and Shane, you might have misheard what Kathy said. She was complimenting you about the shared paths,
Yes.
not the cycleways.
Yes.
Cycleways are part of the shared paths, but
Yes.
I think a number of councillors, especially myself, I've gone on about it quite a bit, is
No.
cycleways are great, but shared paths are even better.
No, no,
because that
we-
means more active transportation, and
Yes.
if we can convince NZTA to do more of that as compared to straight cycleways, we are starting to really make
Yep.
progress.
We would agree.
Right, we have quite a list here. Mayor Goff, and we're
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Two questions. Maybe I'll put both of them up, and you can. They're quite separate questions. Before I do that, just congratulations on the increase in public transport usage, but also in satisfaction with public transport. I think at 91%, we're 5% ahead of the same time last year. So Auckland Transport's doing something right. Thank you for that. My concerns are first in the area of fatalities and serious injuries. It's not Auckland specific, it's right across the country. And my question is, to what extent do we introduce specific policies for the Auckland region to tackle this problem, or do we rely on initiatives that are nationwide initiatives? And what do you think is going to be most effective in reducing the spiralling increase in serious injuries and fatalities? 8 people killed over the weekend across New Zealand. That's something to worry about. So that's the first question. The second one is much more specific. I just noticed that percentage of sealed local road network that's resurfaced is well below target, and that's because money's being diverted to emergency repairs in other areas. In the 10-year budget, we've actually sharply increased the amount of money available for sealing roads, but we might wonder why we're doing that if Auckland Transport was continuing to divert money out of this area into other areas. So I'd just like some reassurance that we're starting to tackle that backlog, that inherited backlog in unsealed roads. So 2 separate questions.
Thank you, sir. Well, just deal with the road safety one first, or the statistics. I guess, Mayor Goff, the plan will come out of this meeting that you, myself and the ministers will have, and that will need to be an interagency plan. But my own view is that independent of what is decided on a national level, I think there will need to be specific Auckland-specific measures, because the Auckland statistics are way above the national average. And there's speed, alcohol, drugs, lack of seat belts, I guess, and many of these things will need to be dealt with education, but also enforcement. And I think there will need to be much more enforcement. We learnt that from the Vision Zero, that when you really commit yourself to actually looking for no fatalities and no serious injuries, enforcement is really quite important. And also alterations to roads in particular areas. I mean, this allocation of road space to cycling, bus lanes, and the like, that has an opportunity for us to actually decrease speeds. But I think a lot of this issue is really speed related.
Okay. In terms of enforcement, obviously, we don't determine what, I mean, one of the patterns has been for a sharp drop in road traffic enforcement over recent years, and maybe there's a line between that and the increased fatalities. But we obviously don't determine that at a local level, but maybe we could influence enforcement nationwide through our advocacy.
Yeah, I think that's why we need a coordinated, committed interagency response. But it is serious, and I would be disappointed if we couldn't get the relevant agencies to step up, because what we're trying to do is stop people getting killed and hurt, and that's a very good reason in itself. So I think that will just play out over the next period of time, but in the meanwhile we have got actions around this. As to the second question, Richard.
Yes, I can pick that up, thanks. As everyone will know, there's been a number of quite significant weather events around Auckland over the last several months, and what's needed to happen, of course, is that the resources have needed to be programmed towards that, and it's not actually so much the money as the plant and equipment and the road gangs as well. So it's really a response to what's gone on, as opposed to when we get tight, we don't go and raid the maintenance budget to spend it somewhere else. So the board has actually had a discussion around whether it's possible to reinstate from elsewhere and to get that work caught back up again over the remainder of the years, but it's certainly not the case that we've diverted the money. We're due to go back to the board on it.
I think the board's very committed to ensuring that the sealing program takes place, and I have spoken to Shane about when budgets are going to be reallocated in order to meet impacts of disasters and difficulty. That really needs to be elevated to the board in this case, because the board has got areas that are no-go zones, and this should have been one of them.
Thank you.
Right, we have Councillor Watson, Cashmore, Bartley, Hills, Derby and Hulse.
Well, I had my hand. Well, I had mine.
How could I miss you, Wayne? How could I miss you? You're on there. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I'd just like to reiterate those comments about the Whangaparā Road Dynamic Laning project, and certainly congratulate the AT staff who've been involved in that, because it's not been an easy project, and a degree of resistance, and they've persevered and been quite admirable in the way they've conducted themselves, so thank you very much for that. My question is just to do with the ferry space, and like the other PT modes, it's undergoing some growth, but I suspect uneven growth. So there are obviously hot spots that emerge, and I just wonder about AT's capacity to respond to those in a reasonably timely manner. And I just think of the particular situation now at Gulf Harbour, where we have some fairly serious constraints and concerns being expressed by the Gulf Harbour ferry community, big growth in numbers, so it's a kind of trip that's challenging in that it's a long distance, and the conditions can sometimes be uncomfortable, etc., etc. So my question comes down to this, and it no doubt has relevancy to the rest of Auckland too, in ferries, and certainly in this ability to meet the strategic themes. When there's a big upsurge, when the ferries are full to capacity, when people are being left behind, as we've had in over various times, what's the ability to then meet that demand? Because obviously the response from the public is to stop going down, not use a ferry, get in the car. So do you have the ability to respond to those specific surges at certain areas?
So Mark Lambert, who heads up our public transport services.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. It is more difficult, to be fair, to respond to ferry surges and patronage because of the availability of vessels and the lead time for vessels and services. We do try and monitor it very closely, and as we saw in Hobsonville when we've had a few issues in the last couple of months, we have been able to move vessels around through negotiation with our operators to respond to those peaks. We are currently going through a tendering process right now to try and get a longer term solution in place, but of course that will possibly require new vessels, new builds, and that will be 1 or 2 years away. So in the meantime, we are trying to make sure we can move the vessels that we do have around, and we're also negotiating with some of our operators to see if we can bring in temporarily some vessels to help us in the short term as well from overseas.
Okay, so just to follow up to that, thank you, Ross. So Mark, you mentioned the period of 1 or 2 years there for the more permanent solution. So are you confident then within that moving around and sourcing other vessels, its ability to meet that demand in that 2-year window if it happens to be that long?
If demand suddenly completely spikes, then possibly not, but we will absolutely look for what vessels we can hire from overseas through the operators. So I'm comfortable we can respond to relatively isolated surges on particular routes at particular times. If, for example, we reduce fares on ferries, then no, we wouldn't be able to do that. We'd have to have a planned approach to it, which is what the tender process is all about.
Thank you, John. Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quick questions, guys. The extraction of aggregate out of the south has gone from 6 million tonnes to 10 million tonnes per annum in the past 4 years. The road network is crumbling under the pressure of those trucks. What are you planning to do about that?
So we'll invite Andrew Allen. Oh, Cynthia? Okay. 1,200. Cynthia Gillespie.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Bill Cashmore, Mr. Cashmore, Councillor Cashmore. I think Bill.
Just Bill.
Sorry. We've just had through the consenting process, one of the quarries apply to raise from 300 to 1,200 vehicles a day to remove that aggregate. AT are in the process of working through the resource consent. The resource consent's been in front of commissioners, and AT have been found to the consent is that AT will maintain the road. We are now going to appeal that as AT. The road has to be maintained by and will be maintained and made safe by the users, and the community is actually not supporting the aggregate as well. So we are well aware of the commercial implications for the community, for the opening and the continued use of the quarry, but we are concerned about the road. AT will continue to work with the appellant and with the developer to try and work through a solution. At this stage, there is no solution, Councillor.
There's 4 quarries down in the south producing that 10 million tonnes over about a 20-kilometre radius, all radiating in towards Mill Road. That's where the challenges are. My second question is to do with public transport, not north-south, but east-west in the south, where there seems to be about 60% of the people who live and work in the south do exactly that, live and work there. Yet the PT is often quoted as being inaccurate. What do we have coming forward for, inadequate would be a better word, have forward for future planning for delivery of better and more enhanced services? Airport, Highbrook, East Tamaki.
Talk about immediate. Strategically or immediate, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. It'd be good to catch up with Council afterwards in terms of specific areas where there are potential problems. I'm not aware of anything which is causing concern, but I'm certainly happy to catch up with you afterwards if necessary. In terms of more the strategic framework, we are working with the airport on some improved bus services across the city and merging into the airport, particularly from the Puanui-Manukau area as well. We have just increased the level of service of the 380 bus, which goes from Manukau and Papatoetoe to the airport, and that's increased its patronage by around 34%. But certainly I'm not aware explicitly of anything that's causing us a problem at the moment, but certainly happy to catch up and understand your concerns.
Thanks, Mark. My last question is to you, Shane. That's completely to do with perceived degree of inflexibility in engineering standards onto roads that don't require such a high standard. So I'm thinking about rural roads, particularly in the north, with people talking about things like cap sealing and not quite the same precision in engineering work. Is that inflexibility just purely an aberration, or is there do we have something we have to work on there?
Happy to answer. Morning, Councillor Hesmore. To be honest with you, it's not a matter of inflexibility. It probably goes a little bit to your first question to Cynthia before. The reality is the rural roads are never built for the level of heavy vehicles or traffic use that we're actually experiencing on them. So it's kind of a, do you relax the rules and the engineering standards to allow what will potentially be long-term a substandard surface, or do you hold your position? So we've been holding our position at the moment because of the cost, ongoing OPEX cost, to renew and maintain those assets is enormous. Your comments around the 4 quarries in the south are equally as prevalent as the cleanfill site disposal that's going on in the north, which is destroying those rural roads. So there isn't a solution because the cost to maintain those is significant. So that's why we hold our line on those engineering standards at the moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be in front of both of you, because I've tried to speak to your leadership in my previous hat as the local board chair and wasn't able to. So this is a really, I'm really glad for this opportunity. I'm really interested in your earlier comments, Mr. Levy, about the culture change in Auckland Transport. And this may be unfair to you, your new CEO, because you're new. But in order for us to work together as a council family, that culture change does need to happen. So really interested to know more about what that is and how you're going to implement that. Because, you know, out there, Auckland Transport seems to be a law unto itself. You know, it's inaccessible. It's hard to get to you guys. And then we have, you know, the issues with, even here on page 74, the Maungakiki Tamaki Oli is not even mentioned here. So really, really hoping that there will be some more support for the local board with that. And it ties in with the 56% satisfaction rate there. So, yeah, that is my question, is what more about this culture change?
Okay, so firstly, you know, with respect, Auckland Transport isn't a law unto itself. But Auckland Transport has been a very project-focused organisation, and with a particular way of working, and with the appointment of the new chief executive, we're looking to make it a much more integrated, less siloed organisation, and an organisation that is easier to work with. With regard to the local boards, I think we have made quite a lot of effort in recent times. In fact, Mark Gilbert, one of our directors, has taken on a responsibility for that. And Wally Thomas could talk more about the work that we do with the local boards. We don't have endless resource ourselves, but yes, I think I regard Auckland Transport as having been through a phase of bringing disparate organisations together, being heavily focused on major projects, which actually have been done very well. We've just received a draft report that was independent and external about public transport. And actually, our achievements in implementation of major projects has probably been regarded as higher than we had anticipated ourselves. But we are looking to work in a different way, and maybe Shane can touch on it himself. It is in many ways a transformation of the organisation, but I guess it's its next phase.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So I think I'm at day 60 or day 70, so it's early days for me. But I think through the first 60 days, I've had the opportunity to travel around Auckland using my hop card and walk around Auckland. So I've done about 1,000 kilometres around Auckland or a bit more. But I think for a lot of people, I've been away from Auckland now for 14 years. I think from what I've seen, the city is unrecognisable from when I left. And a lot of people who are in Auckland day to day do not see that change because it's gradual. There are some fantastic pockets of excellence, great infrastructure, and fantastic things for customers like the AT hop card. The reality is, however, that Auckland's growing so quickly that we need to deliver outcomes more effectively and more quickly to meet that challenge. That's the reality, and there is not endless money to do that with. So it's early days. There's a lot. One other thing I'd say: there's a lot of capability in Auckland Transport. There's a lot of good people, and so, as I say, it's day 60 for me. I'm working, or round about that, but I'm working through understanding the organisation, how it works, how it may change, how change may occur to deliver, I guess, outcomes that you yourself are speaking to.
But there's always going to be some tensions because there's contestable views. In many places, though, we just have no option. The status quo is definitely not an option for us in terms of road usage. So when we're moving to this road space allocation, this is a point of tension, and people have different views. The reality is that we believe that public transport is going to have to roughly triple in the next decade in order to maintain congestion at the level that it is. That is the scale of the issue. We've had one Hamilton move into Auckland in the last 4 years, and we'll have 2.5 Hamiltons move into Auckland in the next 10, and 5 in the next 20. So I guess, a lot of the issues occur because people want things to stay the same. It's not possible for things to stay the same, but I believe, as does the board, that there's a way of working that can make this a softer landing than it might have been in the past. And that is what Shane has been charged with. So we do expect Auckland Transport as an organisation to become different, and that's going to, I guess, unfold over the next couple of years.
Thank you. Thank you, Josephine. We have Councillor Hills, Darby Holt, Wayne Walker and Councillor Newman. So, Councillor Hills.
Kia ora, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, but also just congratulations on some of those figures. Especially, I don't think we think about that 7 years ago we only had 57 million trips a year, and now we're at 91. It's massive in 7 years. I want to, say kudos for that. But there are some issues I just want to bring up, and they might not be able to be answered here. But first of all, thanks, Shane. Meeting for coffee and chatting with you was really good, and I'm not sure how much time you have, but I would implore any other councillor to to try and book that in with you too, because that was really good to and it felt quite accessible to chat to you about. Auckland Transport, I have a few concerns. One is around bus lanes, and probably the best rollout of bus lanes I ever saw was when we kind of rushed them for the City Rail Link and through the city and made them 24/7, and it felt like it happened overnight, but it just happened really well. But I feel we're getting to that pinnacle point again where I'm starting to get more complaints from public transport users. So for the last year or two, I've been getting lots of positives. Public transport's great, I can't believe how fast and regular, and now we're getting to that time again. It's probably also March Madness, doesn't help. But sometimes we are seeing the March Madness throughout the year, also around off-peak time. So I can catch a bus home from down Quay Street at 9:30 and it's everyone standing, and then you have another half an hour wait till the next one. That 7 till 7 for the new network envisaged 3.5, 4 years ago, it may need to be 7 till 9, spreading it out. So what are we doing about the off-peak and the weekends? Because people who are now using the public transport system so regularly don't want to use the car on the weekends or the late at nights or the coming home from the arts festival or whatever, and are just so used to it, they don't want to change that outside the peaks. So that's one concern, is the off-peak. The other one is bus lanes. Queen Street's great for bus lanes, but the link now gets stuck on Victoria Street. I'm getting reports of people getting to Ponsonby and it's taking 45 to 50 minutes to get from Queen Street to Ponsonby. That shouldn't be happening, but I see it when we took away the construction of the City Rail Link. It's gone back to 4 and a bit lanes, and not all of it has connected bus lanes. So how can we quickly do those things, and it maybe just paint? Same with on the North Shore with the new network coming. That was 3 to 4 years ago consultation. We have a meeting with Carla Norris this week, so probably have those questions answered. But I'm really worried some of the services that weren't packed 3.5, 4 years ago when we did that consultation are now shouldn't be a feeder service. They should probably be a full service to the city, things like that. So I'm a bit concerned that we might implement some things which are from consultation 4 years ago. And the ferries, so the Hobsonville.
So, Councillor Hills, there's quite a few questions.
I know,
there.
but I just get them out, and then they can either be written down or given answers.
Okay, because we don't want answers on
and to
detail today.
To Councillor Watson's point around the ferries, once again, we're hitting peak, which is great, but we should have seen that coming, especially with the Hobsonville build, and 1 to 2 years away is going to scare some people off. So those are just 3 questions about public transport. So.
Thank you. So just for the overarching question, we've have in process 5 board-led independent reviews, and one of them is on public transport, and we've had the draft. We need to go through that more carefully. We do have a plan of accelerated bus laning, extending hours, extending lanes. Most places where we're starting to introduce this, we're getting serious pushback, and so we have to work through that. But that is very much part of our strategy, and Mark might just talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Lester. So in terms of the bus lanes, in the last year and a half, we've implemented, I think, around 24 kilometres across the city, which is peanuts in the scheme of things, but it's certainly probably 10 times what we did in the previous decade. So it's like you say, we're going in the right direction. This year we're anticipating around 17 kilometres in addition to those 24 this financial year. So a lot of those are being implemented now, and as Lester's pointed out, we are hearing perhaps from those people who are not so happy about bus lanes appearing in their corridors as well. So we really do appreciate your support for those aspects. In terms of North Shore, as you know, we're still on track for September this year to roll out a new network on North Shore. That will see quite a big increase in off-peak and weekend and evening services. Across the whole of the new network that we've rolled out in Auckland, we've increased bus capacity by around 30%. So that's quite a significant increase, and it's coming around a cost of around 7 or 8% through the tendering process. So we've managed to get quite a good value for money solution there, and yes, we're absolutely focused on off-peak, weekends, evenings, albeit we do get criticism as well for perhaps running services around with very few people on them, so there is a balancing act there.
Cool. And just probably the last point, on the reactive stuff we're seeing it a lot. We bring out some really good comms on it kind of after reactive. like the Mount Eden stuff, to see a figure, I think it was something like 400 buses come through there a day, and about 2,000 people get off at those shops. So if that was in the pre-stuff, and people could see, okay, well, I'm worried about 2 cars when actually 2,000 people get off those buses there, then everyone would go, hey, that maths doesn't make sense. But we kind of do it reactive. Same with Onewa Road. We kind of throw out afterwards, hey guys, 70 to 80% of people are using the T3. If we could get more of that language just in the AT comms all the time about numbers, and actually, you know, we get the pushback, but we need the facts more, and not in a reactive way, I reckon. I mean, we're getting better, but I just think some of those things are so obvious if people saw it. Even, you know, the benefits to car users of 90 people in a bus instead of 90 people in front of them, that whole thing again and again.
Yep. No, we aren't always dealing with logic. That would be nice, but appreciate what you're saying. But look, in the end, you know, we have a board mandated program of bus lane acceleration in terms of the amount we build and the extension of time. And that's absolutely critical to us getting our program working.
Okay, right. We have Councillor Darby, Hulse, Wayne Walker and Newman, and then we're going to have a 5-minute break, and then we're going to do water care before lunch. So we're heading towards 1:30, 1:45 before you have your lunch. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Chair. And welcome, Shane. Good to have you here for the first time, and good to hear you receiving and offering a bit of mentoring to the Chair there. So it's a good relationship, isn't it? Look, I also congratulate you, as the Mayor has, on the stunning trajectory of PT growth and the active growth. Walking and cycling numbers are huge as well. 46,000 cyclists were added last year. But of course, we are saying that every quarter, and we've been saying that for many quarters now, and it will be non-stop. I've just probably got 2 areas I want to home in on, and that is the optimisation program. And I'm emphasising program, and I acknowledge the work that has been done at the airport, but I'm keen to understand when the board will actually see a region-wide program of optimisation. Has the board asked for that, Lester, and when will it be coming before the board so that we can actually see more airport solutions rolled out right across so that we're utilising the existing infrastructure way better than what we are now?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Councillor. We're working very closely with NZTA now on a accelerated network optimisation program. To date, AT have worked really hard on roading network optimisation. We're trying to expand that now to make sure it includes public transport as an option as well. There is a program being worked through in the ATAP refresh, and it's about the amount of dollars that we can, and the program we can deliver at that. At the moment, we're talking about around $200 million. The Mayor, I think, is keen for that to be more. We were worried about deliverability. But within that network optimisation, we're talking about dynamic laning, we're talking about bus lanes as a priority, we're talking about public transport, active transport as a priority as well. It is relatively new as a strategic piece to Auckland Transport, although they've been doing it in the roads for a long time, but it is the focus, and it'll go to the board as soon as ATAP decides what the focus is and how much we're going to get funding, and then we can actually put projects around what we think will deliver best bang for buck or best value for money for network optimisation. But certainly people are aware that Auckland has about 7,349 kilometres of roads. Canada has only about 9,500 kilometres of roads, so we really need to better use what we've got and make sure that we are optimising the network as we can without spending huge amounts on infrastructure. So it is a big focus. It's only embryonic in terms of discussions at a strategic level, but it's certainly be a big focus for the next 12 months as soon as ATAP refresh is done.
Look, my second question is, has any thought been given, both Shane and Lester, to how you turn the culture of an organisation like AT's on its head to ensure programs like route optimisation and active mode focus, safety, all of that is addressed before the building of more infrastructure?
Yeah, well, this is the work that we're doing now, Shane and myself leading that, and that will unfold over a period of time. So I think it's important that we're not critical of what the culture has been. It's just that the context has changed,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
and therefore the culture needs to change to meet the context. The context, I guess, is changing really quickly. So the culture will need to become agile and adaptive. It's not changing from one to another, but to a culture that can constantly respond to the context.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor
But you can assure us that that's where our work is focused.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you. 3 quick things. I've got 2 bouquets, 1 brickbat. The brickbat's already been alluded to, and I just want to add a little bit. This is around the relationship with elected members and the organisation that is council. When anything bad happens, it's none of you. It's actually us. It's us on social media. It's us in the media. It's the mayor, the councillors in front of the cameras. So I guess that for me is my biggest request. Can we just actually draw together again? We knew how to do it 7 or 8 years ago. We can go back to that. Partner up with the elected members. We are your greatest advocates, and we're also your greatest critics if things don't go well. My 2 bouquets. Thank you so much, in particular big ups to Lester. Thank you for sorting out the healthy food guidelines for the vending machines on our train platforms. That was a fantastic piece of work, and we look forward now to almost no sugar drinks and mostly water in our vending machines. Small but major victory. And secondly, the huge improvement that I know there's some cynicism around the gating of our stations and requiring people to only get through using their hop cards. The fundamental transformation in behaviour at Henderson is extraordinary, and the local police, the security guards and people who work in the area have said that, so please keep that up. But we hope to enjoy a much more open and positive relationship with AT. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hulse. Councillor Walker. Councillor Walker.
3 or 4 quick items through you, Mr. Chair. The first of all, a commendation around the Whangaparāoa dynamic laning. Incredibly successful. Stage 1, PM peak. Obviously, stage 2 is going to be the morning peak. I would question your figures. I'd suggest 1 to 3 minutes PM peak enhancement is rather conservative. I've certainly experienced much more than that. So commendation, well done. I'd also like to support the comments of my fellow councillor John Watson around ferry usage, the opportunity for enhanced ferry sailings from Gulf Harbour and other locations in our ward. I appreciate that there are constraints around the provision of assets and the like, but there is considerable latent demand there that we need to meet. In terms of questions, I'm making the assumption, but correct me if I'm wrong, that because of the bigger concern around safety, that you're going to be modifying your calculator, if I call it that, to rework the evaluation of projects around the region to enhance that, and also following up on the issues raised by my fellow councillor Darby around network optimisation, that will also be factored up. And I just seek some response around that first. Very quickly.
That's correct in both instances.
Okay, that's all I need. The other matter that I'd raise is, and again it goes to network optimisation, is some reporting to us around that, particularly as it goes to the extension of T2 and T3 lanes around the region, and the notion of some critical mass around that, and that could be just a yes response, we're doing that. And then the last matter is around communications, and the observation that I've made that could be enhanced both around particularly small projects and changes, and I could give some examples of that, but really the need for you to beef that up, to get information out in advance so that people know of a change that's going to affect them in their life and they can plan for it.
Both noted.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Very concise. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, I just want to go back to a couple of points that have been raised previously, and could I just start with the officer responded to Councillor Cashmore's question about the quarry consent at McNichol Road. Just a clarification firstly. Am I led to understand, because I think what Councillor Cashmore was alluding to was the amount of vehicular traffic from those consented truck movements from the quarry.
All four.
Yeah, which are really moving around the south. But are you addressing the AT's appeal in relation to McNichol Road only? Because it seems to me that the issue is wider than McNichol Road. As a consequence of the consent being granted, there will be a lot of vehicle movements, heavy vehicle movements right across the network in the south. And I don't think you've responded to that at this stage. All you've talked about was the appeal to the condition in relation to McNichol Road only. Do you have anything else to say in terms of the local road networks wider than McNichol Road?
Through the chair, Councillor, we're looking, and I'm trying to work closely with the freight industry about heavy vehicle movements out in the south. I'm going out next week with one of the owners of heavy vehicles to have a look at what exactly they're experiencing on the roads. We've got a lot of issues about the urbanisation, so as we grow, as Auckland grows and they put in a lot of development in right up with that rural boundary, the roads aren't necessarily are not prepared for the heavy freight movements to the volume that's going through now. The current stand is that AT and the developers will work together to work out who pays for it. And that's an ongoing battle every single day. We're trying to be aware of the commerciality of it, but AT cannot pick up the change in the road loading uses and the maintenance bill for a change from 300 vehicles a day to 1,200 a day. And that's without even having the community input into it, and the community are very unhappy with it. It's happening as land use changes, and there is no single solution. We really need to do a lot more with the freight industry around what's best practice for them and how we manage those issues as we urbanise more closely. This will be around Auckland, it just won't be in the south, it'll be everywhere, Councillor. I don't have all the answers yet. I'm trying to work with industry to work out how we progress it.
Okay, I agree with what you've said, but I now want to just, if I may, move to my next question, which really follows on from what the Mayor raised in relation to the percentage of sealed local road network. We're below where we need to be. You've talked about weather and what have you, but is there a need now to look at the resealing budget in light of not only the slow creep of growth, but incidents like the consenting at McNichol and the other quarries, that we frankly are going to need to increase the budget for an Auckland-specific problem now, which is resealing local roads that are under so much pressure, well above where we might be elsewhere around the country, if we're getting this kind of heavy vehicle movement and our budget, which seems pretty constrained based on the key financial performance number in the table, that really the budget for the resurfacing is not going to be fit for purpose, given that the amount of vehicular movement that we're getting on those roads.
Councillor, my understanding is that through the resource consent approach, that the user, so whoever the developer is, will pay for that to make the road fit. That's my understanding. The developers aren't keen on that. I understand the commerciality of that, but AT doesn't. It's true, AT does not have the budget to make the entire Auckland network roadworthy for that heavy vehicle use at that capacity. It's just we will never make that. That's why I understand that the resource consent approach is that it is. They will pay. There will be some agreement about how much they pay to upgrade the road and maintain it.
But outside, if I could just add, outside of that issue, we have said previously that we will deliver more sealing of roads if we had more budget.
So are you going to be submitting back for the budget to reflect that? Because that's the concern that I can only go on the advice of what traffic engineers from Auckland Transport tell me, that you need said budget and that we would have to debate on that basis?
I don't want to get too much into One Network road classification. It's probably down at a level of detail that will keep you from your lunch. But the ONRC, as it's called, is a new funding tool that the NZTA has introduced. It will see funding diverted away from low usage local roads into heavy use roads. So that's more reallocation than new money, but that reflects that some of those bigger roads take a pounding. There's a lot of roads in Auckland that are taking more traffic, for example, than the bottom of the Nauronga Gorge in Wellington, which is the confluence of State Highway 1 and 2. So there's no doubt about it. There's heavy road usage in New Zealand and in Auckland rather, and an increase in heavier vehicles. I think the first thing we need to do is to reprioritise and to come up with the evidence base really on just how much extra traffic's going through these things.
Just one final question, Chair. Am I to understand that what is being thought about here is not an additional budget for resurfacing and rehabilitation? It is a reallocation whereby if we're going to have to look at roads that are copping a pounding through heavy vehicles, that we're going to spend more on that, and the offset is that we have to accept a lower standard of resealing and resurfacing on other local roads because they're not getting the traffic flow, even if the community's expectation is that, well, they pay their rates, they paid their petrol excise, they would expect their local roads in their neighbourhood to be maintained, but we're going to have to go and spend it elsewhere on those roads that are really just being torn apart. Yeah,
that's correct. There's less than 1% of Auckland's roads are in very poor condition, which is a pretty good statistic, really. The Mayor's Letter of Expectation contains an expectation that we'll maximise our funding from the Transport Agency, but the Transport Agency's rules will decree that more money needs to go into heavy use roads and consequently less into cul-de-sacs and small local
Does
roads.
Auckland Transport accept that proposition?
I mean, I think we live in a world of constrained resources, so there's a general point. I think we need to understand that we've got to make the same money go further.
But I think from a governance point of view, I think you make a very good point, and I think we need to subject this issue to deep examination with NZTA.
Chair, I think this needs to be brought back for more discussion at a workshop, because I think that that's not a standard, that's not a value proposition that the community will accept. If we are to pay more, and I don't want to harp on to a political discussion here, but if we're to pay more rates and excise levy and what have you, the community will expect at least the same level of service in local neighbourhoods, as well as obviously needing to deal with the increased level of service required to offset the heavy vehicle usage in the arterials. So could you maybe give some thought to how that's going to be discussed further?
Yes, I will, but it will also be part of the LTP anyway when they come back with the final discussions. But
could I also
that
say,
has been noted,
could I also just say, I said there's 5 board-led business improvement programs, and asset management is one of those. So I think we should get that come through, subject that to a deeper examination at AT, and then we'll bring that forward to the council before you take your next steps, because that'll be much better informed. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you. And my apologies if any of these matters have been already canvassed while I had another thing I had to attend to. But my concern is really in a reputational sense around Auckland Transport and Auckland Council on how it actually manages change. My personal gripe is the fact that Mount Eden is being treated as just one gigantic park and ride, that any day of the week that you want to go down to the area, whether it's the Dominion Road or the Mount Eden area or north, going Gillies and so forth, you will find that there's just no parking available because people from across the region are coming around and actually using it as a one-stage bus stop for them. And that is one issue. The second thing I want to say is that I actually support change. These are key arterials, whether you're talking about Gillies Ave, Mount Eden Road, Dominion Road, Sandringham Road. For Kathy and I, these key arterials are smack bang in the middle of our ward, and we acknowledge the absolutely pivotal role they have in a comprehensive system for the region. Therefore, at a governance level, I would have thought that people would have wanted to manage change effectively. Instead of that, the issues of consultation are being dealt with piecemeal. You're having a little bit for Dominion Road, you're having a little bit for the Mount Eden Village, there's nothing happening in terms of parking. And the reality is, whatever you do, whichever little change you make, it has an impact on that wider area. So this piecemeal approach to change in a community which, as the Mayor will know, can be quite litigious at times, just talk about the sort of Eden Park and those sort of things. The community has become more and more unhappy, and I want to support things like the bus lanes. I do want to support, whether it's a trial or whether it's going to be the full peak hour bus lanes. I want to be absolutely supportive of these things. But if you're talking about Dominion Road, there have been so many sets of plans that have been put in place and then cancelled at the last minute, and now that particular community is waiting to see what is going to happen with light rail, and there's still an absence of comprehensive master plan for the area. So we're talking to them, and I know Kathy is talking to them as well, but they are having to grapple with all of those things associated with changes with bus shelters and installation of pedestrian crossings, knowing that we still don't know what's happening with light rail, and most of this potentially might have to be ripped up not so far down the track. Now, these are business owners in Dominion Road, these are business people in Mount Eden, and there has been wide acceptance that we need, because it's been so popular, mainly because it's being treated as a park and ride, that we're going to need more and more bus stop spaces. But I wonder, and I don't want to address this solely to the officers, because I think the officers are trying to do a good job. I believe at a governance level, there really needs to be an understanding when you're dealing with a community that potentially can become very litigious, that there needs to be a comprehensive approach to the way that we look at change, because in those inner city, more densely packed isthmus suburbs, and they are a series of villages along a key strategic route, whether it's, as I say, Gillies Ave or Mount Eden Road or Dominion Road or Sandringham Road, you actually have to know where you're going before you actually start implementing change. And I put it to you that you're going to have mud on the face of Auckland Transport and Auckland Council if this process is not managed better. And at the moment, yes, there's some consultation in the village and there's generated lots of interest on that, but it's not on the wider
So Lester, could you comment?
ramifications for the entire area.
Well, I think the first thing, there is a Auckland region-wide parking strategy, which has been approved by the AT board and by the council. That is not able to be implemented everywhere at the same time, and that is slowly but surely being implemented. So there is monitoring of car parking. In many areas where people tell us there's no car parking, our own statistics of monitoring reveal that there is car parking.
The monitoring was done in February, as I understand it, when people are away. That you need to do your monitoring in March, when we've actually got a full contingent of people back and into business mode.
Sure. Well, I don't know the exact month the monitoring's done. I could check. Is the monitoring done only in February?
It was done in February.
The monitoring, I think, the council is referring to is done throughout the year. It's not just done at one point in time.
Okay, it's not a one point in time. So I think that's a one point. Yes, look, there's many ways in which we can handle the consultation. I mean, Dominion Road is a real issue because there have been a stop and start, and there's likely to be something different. But this is something that we are talking amongst ourselves, and we take your point. These flashpoints do arise because many communities do not want some of these changes. Part of the change in Mount Eden is around safety, not just around convenience, and this is a point of tension as well. And we've really come to the point, I guess, where we say that safety trumps convenience, and we're really going to push that harder. But we hear what you say. We have our board has heard from the Dominion Road Association and also from the people in Mount Eden. So I don't believe that all of these issues will just dissolve by a different type of planning, but we're happy to have a look at that.
Well, I would really welcome that, because I believe in order for us to be able to support the types of changes that Auckland desperately needs, there does need to be some form of master planning done in that area that people can actually see where these issues are going. And frankly, there is an absence of that at the moment, but I thank you for your willingness to entertain perhaps some better approach to this.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a couple of things to wrap up on. For Shane, who's new here, but Lester and Richard are aware, we do hear from Panuku about the tension at times, or in the past, I hope, about releasing of land, because we have big pressures on Panuku to be returning back into the consolidated funds land that is sold. We would like to see that improve, and of course the more money we can bring in means obviously you will be one of the CCOs requesting more money. So I'll just get you to reflect on that. You can comment. The second one is we will be really interested in the LTP as to your views on the regional fuel tax, which we know you support, but we would be interested to know the catch-22 situation of how it's going to affect you with bus fares and ferry fares. Are you going to absorb them, and therefore in the hope that patronage is going to go up, or are you thinking about raising? But we don't need an answer on that now, because that's a hornet's nest. But maybe on the first question is just the land sales, surplus land sales.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We and I have read very closely the letter of expectations, which sets out quite clearly how the relationship needs to be improved between AT and Panuku. We have already initiated steps between the CEO of Panuku, Roger McDonald, and myself to move that forward. And in fact, at the commencement of February, we had a number of staff forums in Manukau, Henderson, and in the city, where around 65% of our staff turned up to, and the CEO of Panuku presented specific initiatives that they were undertaking where they were looking to work more closely with AT. It's quite symbolic in terms of demonstrating the behaviours of the two organisations working closely together. As to the specifics of property, the CFO of Auckland Transport is currently revisiting the properties that we have with a view to initiating discussions with Panuku.
Thank you.
And the feedback I've had from Panuku is that it has been a very significant change.
And that is the feedback we've had as well, so congratulations. So thank you for that. There's no resolution. We're just thanking you because we do a wrap-up resolution at the end. Thank you for being patient, and sorry for the 40 minutes late, and even more sorry to Watercare in that we're going to be 45 minutes late. And starting again, we're going to have a 5-minute break, please, and then we're going to do Watercare. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
2 o'clock lunch, is it?